The Behemoth Brewing Company presents the Department of Conversation with Pat Brittenden. Behemoth, give me something hoppy.
And we are live with comedian Eli Matthewson. Eli, good afternoon and thanks for coming to the Department of Conversation.
Kia ora. Thank you so much for having me. What a delight to be on Zoom.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yeah. I wonder if this is going. I wonder if this is going to change sort of post-COVID. Like, are we going to continue to Zoom as much as we did post-COVID? Has this become a new way of doing things, or post-COVID, whatever that looks like? Are we going to go back to doing as much as we can in person? There's something quite nice about going to work like with your pajama bottoms on.
I love it. I've definitely used it as an excuse to not meet people in real life. You know, sometimes we want to have a real life meeting, and I'm like, I would rather wake up 5 minutes before that meeting. So let's just do it via Zoom. Or because I'm in a long distance relationship at the moment, I work in Auckland, but I'm trying to juggle a few days here and there in Wellington to make it roll correctly.
So that's where
I want it.
That's where the partner's in Wellington?
Yeah, he lives in Wellington. So I've just got back from there this morning.
Right.
And I did 1 day of remote work, and it kind of worked.
Your work at the moment, you are a comedian. I see you kind of flitting around the country doing fringe festivals and various gigs over the next couple of months. Is that your main paid gig? Oh, no, because you're also writing for, sorry, the name's just jumped out of my head. Have I got your attention? Sorry, the TVNZ.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty close. People make up a lot of different names for the show. It's called Have You Been Paying Attention?
Have You Been Paying Attention? Sorry.
I'm the writer of the show.
Yep.
That's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm in one of TVNZ's meeting rooms. That's why I've got this beautiful curtain behind me.
Yeah. And
but yeah, that's my main gig.
People
that's
often
5
say,
days a week.
Yeah, people often say, what do you do? And I'm like, that's a hard question to answer. So what I typically do is say, well, this is where the bulk of my income comes from. So would that be, if someone said what you do by that, that's sort of, paid Monday to Friday writing with TVNZ?
Yeah. And it depends how many follow-up questions I want. If I'm in a situation where I don't want to be asked too many questions, I say writer, because people are like, okay. But if you say comedian, particularly with an Uber driver or someone at customs or something like that, you're going to get a lot of follow-up questions.
It must be like a writer for TVNZ. That must be. I used to find when I worked in radio, it would be really frustrating at times if people said, what do you do? And I said, I work in, I'm an announcer on the radio station. I used to avoid that because that would engender a whole bunch of questions. So quite often I just say, I work in communications, or I work for More FM. What do you do? Oh, just kind of make coffee. Because it's true, when Kim and Corbett would start, because I was the overnight butt boy, I would make them a coffee as I left the door. So I was, I make coffee for some of the other guys.
Really?
That kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a brown noser.
As I say I work at TVNZ, and then I assume people must make assumptions that I work in marketing or something. And I'm like, yes, and you can roll with that.
Is it cruisy out? Is it like a cruisy job? I would think that, creating content for yourself, you do whatever you want, dress however you want, say whatever you want. Working for like a corporation like TVNZ, is it still as cruisy? Do you turn up in your shorts and t-shirt and flip-flops, or do you have to be a bit more sort of commercial for it?
I would say I have to dress up slightly better than usual, just because our positioning in the office is right next to the actual news. So it's like all your Simon Dellos and your actual news people. So you don't want to look like complete trash. But we do work, for instance, on Sundays. So Sundays we do look like this. Today we look like trash. And some days we start late into the evening, so you don't have to look that good.
And was Have I Been Paying Attention? Was that a kind of a direct response to 7 days? Because a lot of people kind of compare the two of them, even with some of the comedians coming from one to the other. I mean, in the UK seems to be king of those comedian, panel shows. There seems to be thousands of them. There's Mock the Week, and there's 8 out of 10 Cats, and Cats does Countdown, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But is that what it was? Was it like TVNZ trying to go, well, this is doing well on 3. We need something to go along with it?
It's an imported format. Have You Been Paying Attention is from Australia, and the Australian version is hosted by a guy called Tom, and it was his podcast basically that became a half-hour TV show. It's probably about the same age as 7 Days. I think they've just had their 10-year Have You Been Paying Attention birthday. Mm-hmm. And I think TVNZ just wanted a fun panel show for a while. They've tried a few different formats. And this one they brought over, because I think it is, like, in terms of for what a comedian has to bring to the show, it's quite a fun one to do, because you don't have to set up your own jokes. Whereas on 7 Days, you're having a big discussion. You'd be like, here's a sentence about what I'm going to make a joke about, and here's my joke. The way our format works, the setups are all quiz questions. So Haley reads out the quiz question, and you just have to buzz in just with the punchline. So it's like quite fast-paced and a bit of fun.
So it's more, not that it has to be compared to anything, but it's more 8 out of 10 cats rather than 7 Days. Question, answer.
Yeah.
Comedy comes from it through the questions.
Yes. And there's actual points. The correct answers do count as well. So it has a little bit more of a real quiz element. And I think for the viewers as well, like I watch it with my boyfriend's parents sometimes, and they are guessing the answer. They don't listen to any of the jokes. They're just trying to guess the answers to the whole quiz. So I think for some people, they do just watch it as a quiz.
It's funny how that happens, eh? I know for me, and this will kind of reveal my largely geeky side. I watch probably my favorite show, not that I watch it on television, I tend to watch it on the internet, is 8 out of 10 Cats does Countdown, like them doing the countdown version. And I just have to do the maths quizzes. Like it's a hilariously funny comedy show, but the thing that I enjoy and get into most is trying to work out the maths puzzles. I can't not do it. In fact, even when I'm skipping through it, like sometimes I'll skip or I'll look around, or it'll be an episode I've seen before, but it's on in the background. I'll pause at whatever I'm doing to do the maths puzzle because I have to do it. I can't not.
Yeah, I'm the same. Whenever I watch it, I do all the word puzzles as well and try and beat the people I'm sitting with, rather than really properly paying attention to the show.
Which kind of goes to show that, I mean, when we think of comedy, I mean, you're the expert, not me here, obviously. If we're thinking comedy is like how it feels like that's changed a lot. Like that formula of actual, question and answer, actual having knowledge based on top of the comedy. It's like a double whammy. So you can watch it if you want to get the answer to the quiz, like the In-Laws, or you watch it if you want to hear the Jimmy Carr dirty dick joke or whatever it is. It can supply for everybody.
Can be both things. I wouldn't profess to be an expert on comedy. I don't know if there's. Is it possible to be an expert on comedy?
I guess between the
subjective art form.
Between the two of us, you would be the expert on comedy. Seeing it as a profession of yours.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it's technically my job.
Your comedy that you're doing at the moment, the new tour, is called Daddy Longlegs. Have I got that right?
Daddy Shortlegs.
Daddy Shortlegs. Sorry, I knew that. Look, I'm sorry about that.
No.
It's a brand new hour, and I was listening to a podcast just yesterday. The podcast is Mark Maron's podcast, and he was talking to Eddie Murphy. And Eddie Murphy said the hour, everyone talks about it, if you've got a new hour, was a thing invented by Richard Pryor. That before Richard Pryor kind of started touring an hour, everyone had their tight 10. And that was pretty much all comedians, no matter what height of, seniority you had or whatever did, they just all did because they were preparing for late night shows and stuff. And I thought it was really interesting to think that kind of idea of touring an hour and having a new hour was sort of started, according to Eddie Murphy, by Richard Pryor. And you've got a new hour coming up.
Well, there's kind of, I feel like, a separation in the world of comedy in terms of America and the UK.
Yeah.
Because in America, the idea of having it's more like you have a special that you build up over time, and you build up your 10 and then your 20 and then your 30, and then you have your special. And often your special is just like your best jokes start to finish in a fun order. Whereas in the UK, especially structured around like the Edinburgh Festival, it's more like you have an hour show every year. You're always working on a new hour, and the hour tends to have more of a story arc, or be a show that takes you on a journey rather than just a show full of jokes. So I feel like in New Zealand and Australia, we're kind of, because we've grown up with both UK and US comedy, like we've kind of grown up in between those two worlds. So I think you see comedians working here. Some of them are just like, they just work on their gear until they have enough, and then they do the hour. But for me, I think I'm more just like, I want to write a new hour every year or every couple of years, just as and I'll have a thing that I want to make this show about. It's not just going to be an hour of my best jokes.
So a narrative or a theme that runs through the whole hour, that you kind of keep referencing back to, sort of thing, or that's obvious, that's involved with the when you're in that point at the 43rd minute, it's obvious that the theme is involved in that part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think so. And look, often I think most comedians say their comedy show is going to be about this, and then often it shoots off to lots of different directions. But yeah, gives it a structure, gives it a beginning, middle, and end. Yeah. And honestly, I feel like that takes the pressure off, because if you're trying to make a show that is just jokes and jokes is all it is, then they really need to build on each other, and the best one needs to be at the end that tops everything beforehand, which is a lot of pressure. But to tie up a story is kind of more achievable.
It is funny because I'm thinking about, let's say in the last 10 years, there's been a few comedians that have probably blown up in America that aren't American, like the Jim Jefferies of this world. And he had that, everyone who enjoys comedy knows the gun story that he told, or his best friend with multiple sclerosis going to the prostitute, or these stories that he's done, and they're all about 20 minutes. Are you saying for you that you kind of have said this, you talk about one theme all the way through? It seems the other way, the in-between between what you're saying and the American is like what Jim Jefferies does. He tells like 20, 25-minute stories, but he might tell 2 or 3 or 4 of them in a special, or he might do joke, finish with a half-hour story.
Finish with a big story,
yeah.
But often those specials aren't like in the same way as an Edinburgh show would be like, it'd be called Jim Jefferies Live or Jim Jefferies One Word, and the bio would just be his best jokes. Whereas I feel like in the UK they tend to be more like, what I've discovered this year, this show is about a breakup, this show is about something like this. Yeah.
So
but then I think,
what happens if you get somehow you wake up in the middle of the night, and there's the comedy gods are shining in the room, and you've got something gold that's actually not related to the theme. Do you do you put it asunder and wait till the following year, or do you try and kind of crowbar it into what you're doing?
Yeah, crowbar or organically fit it into the seamless narrative of your show.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm what I definitely look at everything that I've got and see what can fit into the show, what will be too much of a detour, what is vital to it. Yeah. So, but if it's really funny, I'll just put it in the show.
Just crowbar it in. If it's gold,
just smash it in somewhere. Because often if you're telling a big story as well, you want to break it up with something a bit fun.
The other thing I was thinking, I was talking to Russell Howard. He came on the podcast the other day, and
huge name drop.
Yeah, thank you. But it's relative. It's not just a name drop, but there's a reason for it. I haven't had a chance to talk to a comedian about this since, so you're my comedian to talk to. He talked about when you're doing those live shows that are for video, you're putting your hour together, you got to make sure the person on the couch gets it. I'm paraphrasing badly, but he was basically saying you're performing for the person on the couch, not the person in the room. And although the person in the room enjoys it, it's the person on the couch, because it's a special, that needs to get it more. And I was wondering if that does happen, how that might change the live performance. You're talking about comedians going joke, or having the narrative. I've been to a couple of filmings of 7 Days, and what a lot of people don't know, obviously, who just watched it on TV, is I was there in the crowd for 2.5 hours, and there is a lot of stuff that doesn't make it. And on that night, some of the funniest stuff didn't make it, obviously, for probably ethics and taste and standard levels, but some of the best stuff didn't make it. So I'm interested in the process of the hour you're talking about. It would seem that, and I'll say American comedians who do specials, because I listen to a few of their podcasts and stuff, they will do like a 90-minute or an 80-minute set that they've been touring for a year, and then they'll get 60 out of it. So they'll cut 20 of the lesser stuff out and just have 60 from it. Your hour, would that translate directly to, well, we don't really do DVDs anymore, but a special to show on a screen as is? Like, is it that narrative that tightly all the way through that you get to your 61 minute, you finish, and all 61 minutes is the director's cut?
Goes in. It's hard to know. I mean, no one's really paying any money for New Zealand comedians to make specials. So,
which is a travesty.
It is gutting, and I wish it would happen, because the main TV opportunity we get is the comedy gala, which is awesome. But everyone comes out and does 3-4 minutes, and it's such a small amount of stand up to get who you are across in. And that would be my prayer to the money people, even in the building that I'm in right now, would be maybe instead, at least for a year, instead of investing this big chunk of money into that one big show with 20 people, you can invest that money into 3 or 4 people having their specials, especially now that things like TVNZ On Demand and like those sorts of platforms are popular and used, and that's where people go looking for the stuff. And comedy specials on Netflix are huge. So if that was to happen to me, I would probably freak out a little bit. I think if someone was like, we want to record your special, it would probably be a mix of both. I'd choose a narrative arc from one of my shows and then stitch my favorite jokes around it to make it a cohesive show with a structure, but that also has my best gags in it.
Because, like, I remember when I was talking to Jerry Seinfeld. No, I'm just kidding. I just thought I'd try and slip that in there. I'm just an absolute.
When we were in a car getting some coffee.
No, just an absolute bullshit. I don't know. It was another Kiwi comedian. I mean, I've done 170 of these podcasts now, so it's not that everyone blurs into one, but I can't remember exactly which conversation it was. And that was a question. To me, it seems like when it comes to production, I understand. I mean, I have production equipment myself. I understand that it always costs, but to produce an hour of stand-up, like the physical costs of the cameras and the gear and the sound, comparatively, it's not that expensive. So I've always been a bit confused as to why we don't see more of it. Is it just that New Zealand's not big enough? You know, maybe someone like yourself, if they wanted to, could tour for 3 years on the same hour. I've heard stories about Jay Leno not wanting to do a special because he's like, why would he give it away when he can tour on that for X amount of years and make money in all the towns?
Yeah, right.
Is it that, or is it that, I don't know, there is an outlet for it? Because, they say content is king. There's TVNZ, there's TV3, or there's, your own online sort of portals and stuff. It confuses me as to maybe is the hold up more with the artist, the comedian's not wanting to do it, or the television station's not wanting to play it, or what?
What's still going to be, if a comedian wants to do it themselves and then try and give it to a network, it's going to be tens of thousands of dollars, I think, at a minimum, in terms of like hiring a venue, dressing it up so it looks good. Because you don't want to do it by halves. If you're going to film your one special, you want it to look really good.
Yeah.
So like Guy Williams did it. I opened for him when he recorded his special at Q Theatre, but then he just whacked it on YouTube for free because for him it was like that's what he just wanted lots of people to see it. I mean, I think there is a world if comedians. I've been talking to Reese Nicholson, who's got a special on Netflix, and I didn't realize Netflix didn't commission it. They made it, and then they sold it to Netflix.
Yeah, right.
But it was still like the biggest investment of his career to film it, and so it's hard. Basically, I feel like one person needs to do it here, and it needs to go great, and then everyone will realize that it's a viable thing to do.
Because that idea of kind of the DVD sales is out the back door now. Well, like at your shows, I'm just trying to think who I've seen recently. I don't want to name drop again, so I'll just say I was at a recent gig, and from memory, looking at the merch table, there was T-shirts. There mightn't have been very much else. Like, what is the merch at the moment that gets sold? Obviously, there won't be DVDs, will there?
No, I mean, it's hard. One of the weird things in New Zealand as well is that we don't have a culture of celebrity as much as overseas. So like when I've gone and done the Melbourne Comedy Festival, so many shows they have merch. They have badges, T-shirts, DVDs, maybe the album on CD, or like a USB drive with the recorded version of it.
All right.
Like a cheaply filmed special. But I just don't think it happens in New Zealand as much, mainly because of like maybe tall poppy syndrome. Like I'd say it's the biggest difference between Australia and New Zealand when I go there, because you see comics who I think are kind of at an equivalent level to where some people are here, and they've got like a set up place to take photos with a comedian after the show and a merch store and all that kind of stuff. And I just think one of the main reasons it doesn't happen in New Zealand is because we don't want to look try hard. It's like that. It is like tall poppy syndrome that we don't have stuff like that for sale.
I wonder if, I was just talking to someone today actually about our personal attributes and how often our personal attributes that are our strength are also our weaknesses. So I know someone who's quite fastidious at getting things done, like get onto it, get things done quickly. It's really, really impressive to watch. But what it also means is this person can't really sit still and just chill either. It's like has to get things done. So it's both a strength and a weakness. Yeah. I think it was Michael Hurst who told the story somewhere about his character in Hercules, and when he was in America needing security, especially going to conventions, and he tells a story about a kid going down Ponsonby Road on a skateboard. I forget the name of his character, but just giving him the Kiwi, the eyebrows up and saying "G'day," and mentioned his character's name and kept going. And that was one of the things he was saying. That's why he loved New Zealand. But I guess the flip side to that is, I don't want a Michael Hurst t-shirt either. So this sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would say up in Auckland, I mean, you see the Lord walking down the road every so often and no one's kind of running up and giving her trouble. Which, it's nice. But I think sometimes it's like we've got, especially in terms of comedy, I'm like, Rose Matafeo is one of the best comedians in the world. Like she won the Edinburgh Award. She's got an HBO special. And I've hung out with Rose, people don't come up and talk to her, ask for photos, which is probably best. It's probably nice to be walking around in society and that being all good. But it does also feel like sometimes we just look down on ourselves as a country. And that's definitely inbuilt on the way the public perceives New Zealand comedy. All you have to do is read any comment section under any article about comedy published in this country and you will see how much we love to hate our own people.
Really? That's so weird.
Every section is New Zealand comedians as an oxymoron, or like, I don't like New Zealand comedians, I prefer Michael McIntyre. Like, it's just an endless fight.
It's so bizarre. I mean, you used the phrase briefly before, tall poppy syndrome, and I guess that's sort of what you're talking about. It's so weird. But then, like, if you could live in a world where, you're Lord and you can walk down the street, yet also you could make a good living off your own country. Because, I mean, obviously it doesn't matter for Lord because she's made tens of millions of dollars in the States and around the world. So she doesn't need to make money out of New Zealand. But, I think about lots of bands that have been, iconic Kiwi bands that really, need to go off after a while and be physiotherapists because they want to have kids and have a house. So that there's just not the money in New Zealand. So unless you break it internationally massive, in the comedy world, you might say maybe Rose Matafeo, maybe a la Flight of the Conchords or Reece Darby or someone, that you have to be, I would think, working other jobs in New Zealand if you're a comic.
Yeah, I would say so. You've just got to be really, to be a comedian and work full time, you've just got to be really versatile. You need to be able to do TV writing. You need to do crowd warm-ups for shows. You just need to hustle and do everything. I don't think it's particularly possible to make a living as a stand-up comic who just performs stand-up comedy here. Well, I would say there's almost no one here doing that full time.
But actually, as I say that as well, I mean, I've mentioned, Flight of the Conchords, Reece Darby. Actually, you'd probably say they haven't done it doing stand-up only either. They've moved into movies and television and stuff. So I mean, do you have to be Dave Chappelle to only have stand-up and nothing else? Like, is that where the level has to be?
Yeah. I mean, Ursula Carlson is would be one of the closest we have. And probably could give up all of her TV and just tour and make a pretty decent living. But it's still, Whereas if you live in the States and you're a rising comedian, you get booked 4 tours and they bus you around and you play all these small things. And even in Australia, there's that same system where they'll do a comedy roadshow after the Melbourne Festival for like 4 months. And so these new young comics get a 4-month full-time gig doing stand-up comedy. Yeah. That's not possible here. We just don't have enough places to perform at.
It's all what you're talking about is also economies of scale. Like I remember when I was doing the overnight shift on News Talk ZB, so absolute bottom of the barrel, worst shift in radio, yada, yada, yada. But if you worked it out per capita at the time, that show, not me, but that show, because there was 2 of us who did it, had more listeners than Bill O'Reilly had viewers per capita. But of
Oh,
course,
yeah.
but because of the economies of scale, he was able to monetize it and make tens of millions of dollars, and you just can't in a smaller country. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So multiply all of those things by, it's a middle comedian can tour 200 locations in America every weekend and earn a living probably.
And living out of it. Yeah. I mean, I think there are some positives about having a small industry, like in terms of breaking into TV in New Zealand, like the connections of people you need to meet to do that is smaller than they might be in the US,
Mm-hmm.
You can probably, if you're a comic in Christchurch or Wellington, and you can probably fly up to Auckland one weekend, and you might be able to get on a bill at the Classic with Paul Ego, tap him on the shoulder. Like those connections can be made quite easily in the country where the industry is so tight, which is good.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of people who are, although they probably, they have other lines of income. Like obviously we all know about Stickman and Paul Ego, but the Jeremy Corbett's and Paul Egos and those guys are probably about as close as you'd get to full-time comedians. I mean, Jeremy and Paul used to both work in radio, but now it's sort of comedy based on television and corporate gigs, and that's probably the bulk of their income. Not that I have any interest in knowing more about their income, but you know what I mean?
I mean, I guess I will say Brendan Lovegrove is probably the person in New Zealand who is making a good living just as a live performer.
Right.
Because he doesn't get booked for TV as much as he should. But I think he basically hustles hard, performs stand-up all year over the Christmas period, does heaps of corporate gigs. That funds his life, which is great.
It's funny you would mention his name. I think I saw his manager or his booking agent or someone on Facebook the other day say he was talking about corporate gigs. He was booked to do 10 minutes or something, did an hour. This man is a legend.
That sounds like Lovegrove.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
It's pretty good.
As a comedian in New Zealand,
as long as you're not the comedian waiting to go on stage after when he does an hour.
it was said more in a positive. The way I read it, and I don't know the background, but the way I read it was he was the comedian at the corporate gig, perhaps at the end of the conferencey thing, and he gave them more than they paid for. That's how I read it. I mean, I don't know the details, but so we'll see.
Definitely, and he would. He's someone who genuinely loves every moment of being on stage, which I think is rare.
What is the? I mean, you're a young man. What's the projection? What's the future? What is the path for you? What do you want to do with your life?
Big question. I would love to record a special, as we've talked about much throughout this, and I would love to. It's weird. I don't know that I really necessarily want to sell out giant theaters everywhere, but I want to be able to keep doing it for as long as possible because I really enjoy performing stand up, and I want to write. I would love to write a film. That's kind of one of my long-term goals as well. I've been lucky enough to write for a few TV shows, and then for John and Ben and Funny Girls and little sketch comedy stuff, and then got to write for Golden Boy, which is a show that I helped create, which is a little sitcom, and we got to do 2 seasons, and I don't know if there'll be any more, but that was a lot of fun to work in a sitcom space, especially because we really went with the full American model of sitcom writing, which I don't think is, most sitcoms in New Zealand are not really in that model. So we really tried to write it and edit it as an American sitcom. So it really was one-liner, shows like 30 Rock or Kimmy Schmidt or Parks and Recreation that we were obsessed with. We were like, oh, let's make our version of that.
I was going to ask you about that because as a creator of a sitcom, it seems that there's a model out there that when especially comedians create sitcoms, they're creating it for themselves. I mean, probably the most famous is, not to mention, our friend of the show again, Jerry Seinfeld.
Best mate.
Best mates. But, even people like Greg Davies with Man Down and those sorts of things, they kind of draw on their own experiences and they write it for themselves. But that's not what you guys did with Golden Boy. Yeah. What was it?
Golden Boy was born out of TV3 were doing a pilot situations. So I think six. They funded six different people to make pilots for different sitcoms, and cause it was a competition, I think we went into it being like, let's make the sitcom that New Zealand would want to watch. So we were like, what does New Zealand love? Rugby.
Yeah.
How can we turn rugby into something that is fun and funny? Let's write a show about the sister of an All Black who lives in his shadow. Yeah, and that was kind of what it was born from, and it was never written with a cast in mind. We just went with a funny idea, and then we got to shoot the pilot, and then we got a year or 6 months or so to then before we actually wrote the series. And when the series started, we like went back to day one, so we kind of replaced the pilot a little bit and went back to the starting block.
And that's on 3 on demand right now if people want to check it out. I know
Sure
it's available there to be checked out. It's interesting the way you would talk about how you wrote that. So it seems like what you're saying is you almost, I'm not saying that you'd use these words, but it sounds to me like you almost took a business attitude towards it. What's the gap in the market? And what do these people, what do they want? As opposed to, I suspect the other ones are maybe even executives seeing the comedian on stage saying we could do something with their story, and actually the other way around, doing it from the opposite end, saying let's turn this into something for the audience rather than you guys going, what does the audience want? I don't know that for sure, but it seems that that's the could be the difference between them.
Yeah, I mean, a big reason for that is just that there's not many sitcoms made in New Zealand, you know. So like when you've got these opportunities, you've kind of really got to think about what is gonna have the biggest appeal to a network or to people. Yeah.
Do you guys own that? Do you own the rights to it?
God, no, I don't think so.
Like your creators.
I think MediaWorks own it.
So if for example that got picked up and Australia wanted to do like the sister of a Australian rugby league player, do you guys do you own any of the rights to it?
God, I'd have to go back and look at my contract,
right.
But I was a bit younger then, and who knows? Who knows what's written in there? Yeah, but I'd love to make a show based on more personal stuff. Me and my only ever ex-girlfriend, Brinley, we have a theatre show called Exes, which is based on our real relationship. We dated from 2007 to 2009. We were both fresh out of high school. Turned it into a theatre show. That was a lot of fun, and I feel like could make a good TV show. So that's one thing that's cooking in the back burner, hopefully.
So you've got one of those stories of kind of discovering who you were after school as you went out, like discovering your sexuality, who you were as a human being. Yeah.
I basically moved to Auckland to come to drama school here. I started to be an actor at Unitec, and then partway through the university year, I just kind of it all clicked into place.
Wow.
I think I briefly dated a couple of other girls when I first moved to Auckland, and then realized it definitely wasn't working out. And then one of my best friends at school was like out and proud, and I was real jealous. And then we went to see Piranha 3D, the third Piranha film that was in 3D.
Right.
I think we won tickets off the radio, and then he dropped me home, and then I told him then, and then it was all go from there.
And I've never asked this question of someone who at some stage has come out, but what's that feeling like? What's that feeling like to go, I'm coming out? Are you terrified and shit scared, or is it like, oh, weight off completely, finally?
I think it's like fully shit scary, because I think it's like once, especially the first person you tell, because once you say it out loud, it's like, oh, that is out in the world.
Yeah.
And especially if that's something that you've been thinking about inside yourself for me at that point, you know, probably at least like 7 years, I've been like, oh, maybe I am, to thinking, yes, I am, to then being ready to tell someone. It's, I can't compare it to anything else, because, yeah, you're boiling on it for a long time before you let it out of the pot. But this is kind of one of the things that I'm going to talk about in my show.
Yeah.
Because for one of the things that I've noticed is that, so my dad has recently come out as well. He is 65.
Really?
I think he came out. Yeah. So he came out in 2017 or 2018 to me. I think, and I was one of the first people he told. And one of the major comparisons, I think, between me telling him and also how I told most people was that it was in a car. Like, we'd been like, often it's like you've been hanging out with someone the whole evening, they drop you home, and then it's like just before you get out, you decide to drop it. And then I think there's something about being in a car that means that you can just like leave, slam the door, and the conversation's done.
Yeah.
But I came out to my dad, and then like, probably almost 10 years later, maybe more like 8 years later, he came out to me in his car as well after dinner at Boy and Bird, a lovely chicken and roast vegetable restaurant up here in Auckland.
Wow. 67. That just must be a mixture of terrifying and freeing like nothing else on the face of the planet at 67.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think he felt like that he was ready for it now. And it's so interesting as well, because obviously when you've had a whole family beforehand, it's not like you're going to be like, oh, I'm gutted I didn't come out to now, because I mean, I'd like to think he values the 5 children he had before that. So yeah, I can't even imagine what it's like to come out at 60, because to me it feels like a lifetime ago that I was in the closet at 20 years old, and to be holding on to that so long, it's a lot.
Oh, I mean, the reason that it's not to pry into you too much into your personal business, but it's interesting to me, and I can say this because my story is out there, is that's what happened in my marriage. My then wife came out, so I've kind of experienced it from the other side. I'm assuming, only because I would assume that your dad had a bit of torment going through your life to figuring himself out. I'm assuming he wasn't still with your mum, or was he?
No, lights back on. He no, they got divorced when I was like 14.
Yeah, right.
And then he came out to me when I was like 28, 29.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, there was a massive chunk in between.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing the comedy I'm seeing the comedy series now about dad and son come out. Trying to figure it out, who tells who how. That whole kind of talking to someone behind the scenes, and how am I going to tell my son? How am I going to tell my dad? How am I going to tell? And then I can see it. It's award winning.
I think the same thing, you know. So hopefully some executive will come on down to my Dunedin Fringe show.
Come on down. Well, I can connect you with Jerry Seinfeld and his people. He might be able to help you out. That'd be pretty easy.
Yeah, thanks. That'd be awesome. Yeah, I know you guys text every day.
That's a really interesting story. It's really interesting. And the other thing that's interesting about it, and again, I guess I think about, and I'm just so you're aware, I'm only very, I'm always very clear just to tell my story, not to tell another person's story. That's their story, you know.
Yeah.
But I shared my story and my perspective, publicly, as did other parties. But I did it for me personally. Part of the reason was it's not uncommon, and often when you're the person who is going, hang on, it's good to hear and see other people's stories, whether it's told through comedy. And I actually think comedians and comedy is the best way to tell stories, no matter how serious they are. Dave Chappelle is a master at it. But actually within that kind of making people laugh and telling them a truth as well is a really good way of doing it. But one of the reasons I chose to tell my story is when I went looking on the internet, when I was going through that, I couldn't really find resources that fitted in with my story, and I wanted someone else in 5 years from now to be able to find my story when it happened with them, to try and figure it out, to help what they were going through. So your dad will have a story to tell, eh?
Oh shit, yeah. Yeah. His one man show will be coming to Dunedin Fringe next year.
2022, Dunedin Fringe, father and son, based on the award-winning hit sitcom Father and Son.
Exactly.
I could do the voiceover for you. I've already got it in my head. I can do it. There's no problems.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it was interesting. I did Edinburgh 2019, the year before we couldn't do Edinburgh anymore, and I met a lot of people because I talked about it very briefly at the end of that Edinburgh show, and I met heaps of people afterwards who had similar things happen with their parents or with partners. Yeah, and it is interesting because I think the initial fear for people is that it completely invalidates the relationship that they had, but I don't think it does. It just it's just part of it, you know.
Yeah, well, speaking from experience, again, only telling my story, it doesn't invalidate it, but it certainly changes it a lot. But like you said, to reiterate and to give you some solace, Of course I wouldn't change anything. I've got 3 children. And without that experience and that life and that, marriage and that kind of stuff, I wouldn't have my kids. So that's just without question. If I had to do it all over again, knowing what was going to happen, I would, because I'd have my kids without a hesitation's thought.
Yeah, that's so nice.
So there you go. It's a nice place to kind of start to wrap up, being told that's so nice, because it's a few minutes before you need to shoot off to do some other stuff. Shall we tell people about what's coming up with you in the next week? Well, if people have a look at their screens right now, if they're watching us, there is your Fringe Festival, Eli Matthewson, Daddy Shortlegs. And it looks like you've got a whole brand new hour of comedy, it says, about all things daddy. Is he old enough to be a daddy yet? What does that even mean? After a bombshell revelation from his own father, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, maybe. We've just been talking about that. It's been a wild few years. And you also said you're going to be in Christchurch as well.
Yes, the same show's coming to Little Andromeda about a month later, the end of April. And then Wellington and Auckland dates coming up to be announced.
Yeah. There we go. They haven't got their tickets up yet, so I'll just leave that there. If people want to find out more about you and what you're up to, Eli, is your website the best place to go?
Yeah, elimatthewson.com, or I'm on Twitter or Instagram. It's just my name. Eli Matthewson.
Do you wear shorts as much as it appears that you do when you're in your kind of on stage and publicity stuff? You seem to wear shorts quite a lot. I mean, I relate. I do as well. But is that your thing?
Yeah, I love getting the games out. And also because it's like a weird... a lot of comedians feel like it's a break of a rule. Like James Nokise hit me up at the gala last year. He was like, "You're not meant to wear shorts on stage, are you?" And I was like, "Nah, you can if you want to, man."
Hey,
I think especially with like men are so wrapped up in like, in stand-up, people are like, men wear a suit on stage. I'm like, the more we can break that, the better.
Yeah. All right, dude. Hey, look, thanks so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to seeing you when you get to Dunedin and come see your show, and it's going to be huge to find out more about that those life-changing things you've learned through this journey. But thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time today. And Eli Matthewson with 2 T's, Matthewson.com is the place to find out more about Eli. Eli, dude, all the best. Cheers for that.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure.